So welcome, folks. I'm seeing some familiar faces. I'm seeing some folks here for the first time. I'm loving that. It's really been a wonderful opportunity to get to know people. It's such a strange transition, right? I actually went to school for 3 years, graduated last year, and the graduation was the first time that I actually got to meet some of the folks that I've been seeing online for 3 years. And what a difference it makes to be bodies in the same room together, right? Like that's such a difference. It's a very different way. I've been talking about the phenomenology of our relationships and what that means. So something to be thinking about while we're here. So tonight's session is called Emergent Conversations. I'll get to that in a little bit. But first, my name is Greg Bonin. I'm the union's Director of Organizational Culture and Administration. I am an ethical culture leader and a candidate for ministerial fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association, and you're welcome to use all pronouns with me. You all here together are at the 109th Assembly of the American Ethical Union. And this is the union's first hybrid assembly, and really the first time that we've had the opportunity to gather together in person as an assembly, I think since 2018. Is that right? 2019. Okay, right. And 2019 was in Miami? Tampa, yeah. Florida confuses me a little bit, so I apologize for that. But this year, the Assembly is exploring Mindful Stories, a Ritual of Care. And as we move through the weekend, we'll unpack our mindful stories together with folks both from the movement and then guests who align with ethical culture's aspirations and values. Tonight, I'm inviting you all, whether you're here in the room in Minneapolis or on Zoom with us, to give yourself permission. Permission to pause, permission to be present here, and permission to remember your body and remember the stories that your body is holding. Speaking of bodies, you know your body and your needs best, so I encourage you to do what you need to care for yourself. Hydrate, drink water, use the bathroom, because our bodies do that, and step away or out of the room when you need to. Some things might come up for you as you're meeting some folks or re-meeting some folks for the first time. There's a low sensory room and a conversation room just down the hall if you exit the room and go left. And several of our leaders here are available if you'd like pastoral support. Tonight you can reach out to Hugh Taft Morales if you just raise your hand here in the second row to chat or reflect if that's needed. So tonight we are going to explore what I'm calling Emergent Conversations. And everything in our conversation tonight is an invitation. There are no demands. That said, this conversation does need you, and it needs your participation. As we heard earlier from Humanists MN, there have been a lot of changes in this past year between the upheaval in our communities and in the world. And this upheaval shows up in our ethical societies and in our relationships and also in ourselves. And sometimes this constrains the way that we work together and our relationships with each other. Upheaval can also crack things open. And I hope that in one of those cracks, you've also had some joy bubble up for you. And I just want to emphasize how important it is to remember those sources for joy, because the joy is what's going to get us through all of this together. The joy is going to remind us what's worth living into. And our conversations tonight are also an opportunity to connect and reconnect with each other about what's meaningful for you and for us right now. Amidst the changes that we're living into, consider this an opportunity to build or rebuild trust, to learn about and from each other, folks who are in this movement, and maybe move towards some honest conversations. So this conversation might be about meeting someone new and witnessing their story, and maybe even learning about your own story for the first time. Because we're going to look at the past year and we're going to look at the year that's coming up. And it might be about exploring who and where you might grow into in that context. This conversation is also an experiment, and as such, I hope you will approach it with curiosity and wondering. And I just want to say really quickly, curiosity and wondering are hugely important for the work that we're doing. I think especially important for humanists, because curiosity and wondering bring a kind of humility, a kind of reflection, and a kind of way of being with one another that sometimes we don't get in popular discourse. So to give you an idea of what to expect tonight, I'm going to walk us through our conversation first. First, we're going to have some time to reflect on the past year. I'll invite you into that. Then we'll break into small groups so that we can hear from each other. We'll break into groups of about 4. After that, we'll come back together and share with the room as you're comfortable. Again, all of it an invitation. We're actually going to do that twice, the first time thinking about the past year, and the second time thinking about the year to come. Welcome, folks. During the reflection time, it's going to be about 5 minutes, you might want to write down a few words. So you can do that on one of your devices if you're comfortable with that, your phone, your tablet, your laptop, maybe text yourself. Or you can write it down in some kind of paper or pen that you have with you, and when we get to that point, Trang, who's here in the second row also, conveniently placed next to Hugh, Trang will come around and give you a pad and a pen if you need that. You're also going to be invited to share some of your insights. So we're going to try to alternate between folks here in Minneapolis and then the folks on Zoom. We're going to also try to use a weighted stack to make space for folks who are sharing for the first time. And then, and I'm going to ask for y'all's help on this. If you've shared 1 or 2 times, please join the stack after others have raised their hand. Again, being our first hybrid assembly, there are some pieces that we're still working on, so appreciate your patience and cooperation as we try and figure this out together. And also, if you are with us on Zoom, please mute yourself when you're not speaking so that everyone can hear the person who is speaking more clearly. One agreement that I'm going to request for tonight is that when we share, we speak to our own experience. Tonight's conversation isn't really meant to be about fixing, saving, advising, or correcting each other. It's about reflecting and listening and speaking the truth of your own experience, which usually means starting with an I. I'm guessing most of us have heard about starting and using with I statements. Asking a clarifying question is fine, and it's also okay to say no to that question. So practicing consent, practicing your boundaries. If you're okay with this agreement, can you just raise your hand or give some visible sign of consent? Wow, that's 100%. Wow, awesome, fantastic. Even in the back, wonderful. And I unfortunately can't see Zoom right now, so I'm trusting folks on Zoom have also raised their hand. And if you're not okay with this agreement, everyone in this room is okay with it, but if you're not okay with it for some reason, I just ask that you consider witnessing today rather than actively participating. So let's start with something small. Trang, if you want to come up, Trang is going to be our mic runner this evening. So let's start small. What's one word for what you're feeling right now? So pick some feeling words. Are you curious? Are you anxious? Are you bored? Are you happy? Are you excited? What are you all feeling? And just raise your hand and Trang will come out to you, and then we'll start stacking folks on Zoom.
Hopeful.
Ah, excellent.
Curious.
Wonderful.
Mellow.
Mellow, yes. Are there any Zoom folks that are stacked? Not yet. Not yet. Anybody else? A feeling word?
I'm grateful.
Grateful.
Impatient.
Impatient, yes.
Confused.
Confused, indeed.
Open.
Open. We've got some folks. Do we have some Zoom folks that want to share? So can we amp the Zoom folks?
Some of our Zoom folks have said, Nick Sanders says, hopeful. And Jan says that they are concerned.
Restless.
Wonderful. Any other one-word feelings that we want to share into the room?
Anticipatory.
Anticipatory. Wonderful. So just take a moment and sit with those words. Sit with what you heard. Curiosity, hope, confusion, mellowness, impatience. All the things that we're sitting with these days. And so this is where we are. And I want to invite you to think about your journey over the past year. About a year ago, where were you? Right? So we were somewhere in the assembly build-up, listening to potential futures for the American Ethical Union. There were a lot of meetings, I remember that. And there were a lot of discussions. And what was your journey? How did you get from there to here? And where are you today? What's a story that comes up for you? I'm going to invite you to write that down, maybe a few words or sentences. If you need a pad and pen, please raise your hand. And we're going to have about 5 minutes to reflect on this, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms. So just think about the journey over the last year, where you were and how you got here, if there's a particular story or some feelings. And I'm going to start our 5 minutes now. So finish up, maybe jotting down any last words or finishing the sentence you're working on. And I'm going to invite you here in this room to break out into groups of 4 and self-select, maybe pick some folks you don't know very well. If you're on Zoom, Justice is going to invite you into breakout rooms in groups of 4. And when you get into your group, I'd like you to introduce yourself, say your name, your pronouns, your society or how you're connected to ethical culture if you're not a member of a society. And then take some time to share your journey over your last year. Only share what's comfortable for you. Again, this is an invitation and not a demand. And as you're sharing, the other folks just listen, just witness that story, and then take turns. And this is going to be about 20 minutes, so this is a good time to lean into those conversations, lean into that sharing. And at the end of 20 minutes, we'll come back and share out to the room. But that's about 5 minutes each, and so self-time yourselves. Justice, I'm going to wait for your cue to let me know when instructions are in chat and when breakout rooms are set up so that we can start the timer. In the meantime, if you want to start gathering in groups of 4 here in the room, you're welcome to do that. So just settle back into your seat, settle into your virtual room if you're with us online. Give yourself just the space of a few breaths to let everything you shared and heard land in you. And I'm going to invite us to share in a moment, but first I want to let you know that the Assembly sessions are being recorded this year, and they will be made available to AEU members using an unlisted YouTube link. And what that means is that the recording for the session can be viewed with that link, but we're not going to publish it publicly. And as we continue in this session, please keep that in mind and share only what you're comfortable sharing. So now, you're invited to share an insight from your conversation. Think about what is one thing that you learned during your conversation that impressed you, or surprised you, or just resonated with you. Just one or two sentences maybe about how that landed with you. And remember our agreement to speak about our own experience. Raise your hand here in the room or on Zoom to share your insight. And you're invited to share with courage, but also honor your own boundaries and needs. Trang, thank you. I neglected to call on you.
I noticed that all four of us, we had different observations, but we all felt more hopeful now than we did a year ago.
I was struck by how many of us shared being conflict averse.
My feeling from our conversation in this group is that every single one of us are having trouble finding leaders.
And Liz, can I just ask a clarifying question? Do you mean ethical culture leaders?
As ethical culture in need of leaders.
Yes, okay, thank you.
We had two general thoughts. One was kind of a uncertainty and disappointment in the stress and sort of chaotic way things were going. But the other side was hope that we can now focus on our mission, our ideals.
Thanks, Fred.
Hello. So I'd say we all suffered through the stress of the last assembly, and we all agreed that it was stressful and that there's hope going forward because we have a younger and more diverse board and leaders.
And how are folks on Zoom? Is anybody stacking up there? No? Okay.
I can say something from our group four of us, and I was impressed by the extent to which we really talked a lot about our feelings of our own society that is providing community for us. Not so much, I think, on the bigger picture of the medical union. But at any rate, that was my impression. That we're looking to our own home bases.
Thanks, Nick. Any other Zoom folks want to chime in?
This is Emil, EM from Baltimore. One thing that resonated or landed with me is how one society is making the transition from leader-led to member-led, and that it's going very well with a lot of people stepping up, and that resonated well with me. I was glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thanks, Emil.
I have a clarifying question about which society Amo is referring to.
I'm only allowed to use my statements.
Yeah, I don't, this is Kimberly, Sheridan here, they, them. I don't know what happened at the last AEU national meeting, because I would have been too shy to go, but I did share my story, miracle story, dental care, and the insurance that voluntarily paid for all of it without me even asking. So, I mean, if you want a miracle story, that's it. I didn't say anything. Their office did it for me. They convinced them, so I can smile again. And I'm more confident now.
Mm-hmm.
And I get out more. Love it.
Thanks, Kimberly. That is a joy bubbling up from the cracks for sure.
So two things. I think we thought that the decisions made at the last assembly, specifically the organizational decision about the one rep per society, were reactive rather than thoughtful and proactive, and it's entirely possible that may be revisited at some point. The other thing is that our level of interaction with the AEU really does vary by society and really is in kind of an experimental phase, and that there are definite possibilities, but there are no universals about how societies interact with the AEU.
Thanks, Tom. Would anybody else like to share?
I'm going to have two speakers for one group, I'm sorry. But I didn't get a chance to add two other thoughts that I have. And one is that this year, I think, has told us that we need some more trust building, team building, communication skills with each other, honesty. Because we were 2/3 through the year and found out that there was this big divisive issue and that there were divisive feelings, that really prevented, I thought, a lot of more progress that I had been hopeful for at the beginning of the year, which leads me to the second part where I think we have some consensus on making a difference as an organization. And, it may be a little bit of divisive in terms of the how and the why and whatever, but I think that's what we need to focus on. I just don't feel like we accomplished that this year.
Thanks, Rich. We've got Solomon.
I'm stuck with speaking for our group because they won't. I think there was a certain consensus in our group of about two things as far as the society goes. The stories tended to be one of philosophy, mention of the Adler philosophy and the philosophy of humanism. The other was the people that tended to be involved. Our group tended to rally around the communities in which they discovered in their different groups. As I too found in my group, that there was an attitude of welcoming, that it was non-judgmental, that there was a utilization of belief and skills in helping society, which seems to, for I think all of the issues that go on, seems to permeate a lot of what the society is about. And I guess if I have an opinion on that, is that I believe that needs to be reiterated. People are getting things from the community, the communal nature, the positive nature of the people that they are encountering, the lack of judgment, the sheer acceptance. I know that's been my experience. It's why I kept coming back. Took me a long time to become a member, but it was I kept coming back just because the people were who they were. And based on the members that I saw, the stories I heard, it was the same for each individual in the group I was in.
Thanks, Solomon. Any last sense? Oh, Zoom? Yes, that's what I was going to check. Yep. So Condra just conveyed a request from Zoom that if you are sharing, to just first briefly name the society that you're affiliated with, just so they know who's in the room. It's a little harder for them to kind of see folks here, and we conveniently have we conveniently have folks in boxes that tell us where they're from. So, any last insights to share, either from Zoom or here in the room? Yeah, Julia's here.
Hi, I'm Julia, originally from the Chicago Society, currently FED's representative. I was trying to figure out how to say this in terms of I, but I was struck by how many of us kind of think about these almost existential questions about how one, especially one of our members, moves through conflict in an ethical way, or thinks about some event or perception in terms of, are they right 100% of the time? That's almost never the case. If someone's right 1% or not, and how people kind of in interpersonal conflicts, which we've seen come up in the movement in the last couple of years. So just kind of those struggles that we all have as humans, and having seen, people sometimes become someone that they would otherwise criticize as exhibiting characteristics that are of someone outside of our movement, for example, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Julia. Last call, any insights on this? Oh, sorry, there you go, Audrey, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe build on that for a moment. I'm from the New York Society for Ethical Culture. My name is Audrey, and I really love to return to the invitation that Felix Adler made to bring out the best in others and thereby oneself. And it humbles me a lot, because when I think I'm doing my best and I feel that full of my best self, I remember that. I think, wait, what about, am I bringing out the best in someone else? Because if I'm not, I probably am not seeing my best self right now. And it really helps me kind of, that one philosophy has turned so many situations upside down, backwards, and around for me in ways that have surprised me and have made me see people who I have enemied differently. I have brought out things I've been surprised by in other people, and I've come therefore to admire people that I didn't think I had the capacity to admire. So I think this conversation that we had today brought that forth for me a lot. Yeah.
Wow. I'm tingling. That was, thank you for that, Audrey. And thank all of you for having the courage to share. I just want to name that I've heard such a mix. Conflict, I've heard interpersonal pieces, I've heard a lot of hope. A lot of people have hope, and a lot of people are thinking about essentially what's next, which is precisely where we're headed in a moment. So I want to just give a minute for that to just land, not a minute, a few moments for that to land in us, because there were a lot of big things, I think, just named there that represent a lot of big stories that we've had here at the AEU over the last year and in our own societies. So I'm taking a breath. I will invite you to take a breath if that's helpful for you, whatever helps you land and gives you that feeling of expansion maybe. So I want to invite you now into another few minutes of reflection and remembering everything that was just said, finding those threads, maybe finding something that came up for you. Think about where you want to go in the next year, where you want us to go in the next year. Maybe if you want a date, imagine yourself July 2025. Hold that picture of yourself, hold that picture of your society or the union, and what's changed or grown for you? So I heard a lot of seeds kind of planted in these conversations, but what's actually changed or grown? What's maybe not here a year from now? What have you let go of, or what has passed on? And what have you invited into this space? And so, using your device again, or your pad and pen, I'm going to give you all about 5 minutes to think about that, reflect on that, and then we'll break out again into a second set of breakouts. You're welcome to stay in your groups where you are, or return to your original seat if that's something that feels good for you. And as we come into this next sharing, I just want to acknowledge that these aren't just statements or stories. These involve our bodies. They involve where we've been and who we've been and who we are and where we're going. And that there are feelings that come up. There's a sense of risk and vulnerability sometimes that comes along with this kind of conversation. So I want to acknowledge that and just name that because I think that's in the room with us here. And Chandra, are folks back from Zoom breakouts? Yes? Awesome. So I feel like maybe we got a little bit more honest or dug a little deeper toward the second half of our sharing last time, and maybe we could pick that back up. But sharing again from your own experience, what's one thing you learned during your conversation that impressed you or surprised you or resonated with you, especially if it was a thread carried in from the last conversation? And so, again, if you could just raise your hand and Trang will bring the mic to you, or if you're on Zoom, stack yourself with your raised hand there on Zoom. Yeah.
I heard in my group, I'm Audrey for those, sorry. Okay. I heard in my group that, and I want to say I was so excited to hear this, not from myself, that joy and play are essential for growing our communities.
Thanks, Audrey.
Nobody in my group seems to want to do this. In the discussions that I've had, there were two things that I found interesting. One, in almost all the people I've talked with and this group, is that each society seems to be working on pretty much the same thing, and that is kind of recruitment and figuring out ways to gain members. That seems to be a common theme for everyone I'm talking to, and that was interesting for me to find out. The other thing that came out was an idea that I thought was absolutely fascinating, and that was support for passions as a mean of recruitment. If someone has a passion, the society supports that passion, and that person in turn takes over. Because a lot of what I'm also hearing is that there's a lot of burnout. because the same people are doing the jobs over and over and over again. The same people on the boards, the same people are volunteering for these things, and that of course results in burnout. And it's not because these people are trying to wrest power and want to hold on to these positions, it's because no one else kind of steps up to do these jobs. And it seems to me that supporting these individual passions, because that's how I became a member. I joined and my name is Solomon Gibson, and I'm from the Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle, is the group that I am with supported what I was really what I became interested in and crafted, and they supported it wholeheartedly. And in doing that, not only did I have to do the job rather than someone else, is that I felt that with that kind of support, I should support them as well. And ultimately, I became a member because I wasn't really a joiner. I don't really join anything. It's not that I don't support it, I just don't join it. But they supported me in what I really wanted to do and was interested in. It was an ethical action and continues to be. And given that, I felt I should return that.
Thank you, Solomon. We'll take one more in the room and then turn to Zoom if folks are stacked.
I'm Matthew Heil from the St. Louis Society. One of the things that our group shared is that the current board number is, to be polite, too large, and that it should be cut down to 7. There's no way for a group that big to be effective. So that should be something that we could do here. So,
thank you. Thank you, Matthew. And Condra, we have some Zoom folks.
My emphasis was that, I'm sorry, Janine, first, I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right. Well, one of the things that's striking me now listening to other people is that the ideas you're sharing are very much like the ideas that we had about how we're burned out and we need a rest and we need other people to take on responsibilities. But in terms of the AEU, and what we see for the AEU in the future is, we'd like to see, I'd like to see anyway, more communication with the AEU, like let us know what you're doing. Communicate with these societies when you have a board meeting or when you're working on something, because unless we're on the President's Council or able to attend meetings, which not everybody can, we don't really know what's going on there. And we don't know some of the things you're doing that we might be interested in and that we would really benefit from, like the leadership speaker program and the lay leadership program. I mean, I'm aware of some of those. So that was one thing that came out. And the other thing was, I found our group had larger societies and very small societies. We all seem to have the same problem. Whether we're, the biggest society or the smallest society, we all have the same problem of we need more people to join, we're losing people, and it doesn't seem to be directly proportional to our size. I don't know, maybe some other people from the group want to say other things.
Thank you, Janine. Was there somebody else stacked on Zoom? Kimberly?
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. I thought I'd raised my hand. I guess it didn't take it. Yeah, I'm from Baltimore, and I think looking at, a regional problem, the issue is that I believe because that's the way my mind works. We all got to get out of our bubbles and go out into communities that we're not used to getting into. We've got to show up at more of our street fairs. We have a lot of them. The Sowilo Festival, Pigtown Festival, Huff's Point Festival, Green Street, everything, and not just the ones we're used to. But that means all of us going into neighborhoods where they don't feel comfortable with and engaging with people in the first place. That's the problem. We can't be too set in our ways because we metastasize. It's like a pond that no longer gets fresh water, it silts up. And also, I guess with some meetings, because we don't have a permanent building of our own, we might be able to have meetings out around in different areas and also go on outings to explore hidden areas of our community. And maybe even regionally, if we don't have a leader that's member-led, sometimes between us and perhaps Philadelphia and DC, we could act as ambassadors and occasionally have guests go up and down and meet each other, hopefully without driving our respective treasurers crazy, because I know money is an issue. And I'll give what I can, and I hope other people can give more. But perhaps a more regional getting to know you, mingling together more often and give each other presentations would be wonderful.
Thank you, Kimberly. If that's everybody stacked on Zoom, Ken, Trang, if you want to.
Hi, I'm Ken Novak from Chicago. Our group met in the low sensory room, so we got back a little late. One of the things we heard is the hope that we can reach more and younger people, that we'd have the resources, the staff to do some things nationally. I used it as a projective exercise. What would I like to see established? And I'd like us to have the same kind of monthly meeting that President's Council and Ethical Action do for people who do programming and people who do communication. I'm really hoping that we'll have a number of training modules ready for people and follow-up discussion circles on what we're learning. So those are the things that I'm hoping for and that we're concerned about.
Thank you, Ken. Jay?
I wasn't in a group, but I was snatched up. So I like when I'm snatched up. That just means that I'm available and being vulnerable. So I had this really, really great conversation along my little pathway walking. And it was about change. And change from a space where age doesn't mean that we don't change. And I was really liking that. It really resonated with me, that it didn't matter how one saw themselves in the world regarding their years of being seasoned, that they were still available to change, and that they were still able to lead, and they were still able to offer this effective and impactful way of holding and building a bridge between if it looks different. And so I was really appreciating that conversation, and I just want to say that, I think it's something very important for our society, for our movement to always consider, what is our threshold for change, right? What does that look like is one thing, but what is our threshold? And when somebody offers us change, what is our capacity within our societies, within our movement, to engage it? Because it will not look like, even sometimes the things I sometimes think change should look like. But how do we gauge our threshold? How do we gauge our capacity? And how do we prepare our societies and our community to actually hold space for that? So that's something I wanted to bring up as I was in my little travels of going down the pathway.
Thank you, Jay.
Hi, Julia again, Chicago, Fez. What I was hearing from our group, which I'm also hearing from some other groups, was the word voice. To get our voice from the movement, from particular societies, AEU, our name out there. We talked about the billboard that Humanist MN utilized and things like that. Like other people mentioned, attending Street Fest, just getting out in the community and just like attracting not only members but just people, and getting and kind of, I don't like this word, but like using the moment in this way in this year, this election year, and everything going on. I think there's obvious reasons that the ethical movement has a lot of opportunities to bring in people. I think a lot of people are looking for spaces like this.
Thanks, Julia. Trang, yes, wonderful.
And I already have the mic. So I'm Trang with Washington Ethical Society, and I think one of the things is this past year has been challenging in that, trying to get the new board, which is a representative board, up and going, and I know that's been challenging, and I feel like we haven't really used this time to really do more reflection on what is our vision at the AEU in terms of where we want our future to be, what we want it to look like. And I don't even know that we could articulate that, right, now. And what is, again, not only our individual visions, but what is our shared vision? And I really would love to have more conversations about that. And as a pitch, tomorrow afternoon, we will have at a crossroads, continuing the conversation. So this is an opportunity to talk more about that and ways that we can work together and collaborate together. So I would really invite you, well, it's the only choice for a workshop, but it'd be great to see you there.
Thank you, Trang.
Clarifying question, where can we find part 1 of Crossroads?
Part 1 was on Zoom on May 30th, and we did record it. So, and if you ask me directly, I can send it to you. We've also sent it out pretty widely beforehand.
And I think, Trang, and correct me if I'm not accurate here, but I think we recorded the presentations from each group, but not the ensuing conversation.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And I guess with our group and with what I've been hearing here, this is giving me a renewed focus on specific projects and specific deliverables with specific timetables and specific outcomes. So appreciating again the work that you, Greg and I are working on with the sibling societies and society profile project, where we've identified so far 17 different types of groups among the 6 societies that we've spoken to, which of those work, which of those don't work, learning from that. Having a discussion earlier today about the scope of responsibility for a facilities director, what makes sense in terms of workload in that area. Ann Clayson from BSEC has led the process for getting 6 or 7 different ethical culture leaders to go ahead and come and talk to us so that we can get a better sense of what might possibly work for BSEC, and that'll be helping us with discussions about leaders going forward. So, we're thinking very, very specific, very tactical, very deliverable focused at this point, and I think it's important.
Thanks, Tom. Condor, are there any folks stacked on Zoom right now? No? Okay. We have Fred's got his hand up.
Thank you. Fred Bride from Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle. And I really like the word vision and more discussion about that, because it is, in my opinion, the vision that's going to pull us together like a magnet and make everything work. And without it, and we need to focus on that and talk more about that. How do we establish that as our focus rather than, organizational details?
Do any other folks want to share? Yes?
Yeah, it's Rich, the CCO, Long Island, and what I hear is we all have a lot of common issues, but also it's how do we get that involvement, not just of our leadership team. And our leadership team is a little different from others, I think, in that they're the same people for the last 30 years. So what I'm trying to do this year is say, bring new, let's get some new people in as committee members or whatever. And I'm thinking the AEU, because I like that each society is represented on this board, but it is large. But I don't think it's cumbersome. And I think if we each had work to do, committees, took us a while to get them up. I don't even know if we have them all up and running yet. So I think maybe that's something the AEU directors and the board, can work on. Because that's an issue within this organization, is how do we get our members, our board members involved, and then how do we get out services, awareness, or whatever to all the societies and society at large. Thanks.
Jill and then Condra.
We talked a little bit about leader training. We have several retiring leaders, and we have people who've been brought up through the ethical culture clergy leader training program, but they're not employed, and that's problematic. We either need to change how we're training our leaders, or perhaps train lay leaders in a more structured way for those societies that don't have a leader or don't want a leader or can't afford a leader. We just feel like there are holes in just leadership training on every level.
Yeah, so a lot of things going through my head, but one of the things I wanted to say was a part of this is really talking. So earlier, I guess this year, at the end of last year, we had this leadership cohort, so people who were in lay leadership positions across the movement, and we just sort of learned a lot about each other, learned about our leadership styles, how we work, and I think it wasn't until the very end where we got to a place where we were really comfortable talking with each other. And I think that is the hurdle for the movement as a whole, is getting to a place where we can have conversations, be trusting enough to be vulnerable, share ideas, and not feel like we're going to be attacked or anything like that. And I see sort of conversations like this as being that starting place. But we were talking for what? It was 2 months? Yeah. So, and that's a small group of people. So I think when you scale that up, right, the type of conversations we need to have are going to be lengthy, and we should be patient with ourselves and kind with ourselves. So that when we do start to have these conversations and think through what do we want our organizational structure to look like, right? People have said the board is too large, right? But let's actually take the time to think about what type of structure would work before making another change, right? And being flexible. If something doesn't work, let's not beat ourselves up about that, and then think through how do we make changes that can be sustainable. So, a lot of patience and a lot of thought and a lot of conversation. But we really need to, I think, build that trusting space where we can have those conversations.
Thank you, Condra. Any other last words before we move toward closing up our session? Yeah, Jackie, if trying to bring the mic.
Jackie Sims from the Ethical Humanist Society of Asheville. One of the things that came up in our group was having a larger AEU staff so that the things that many of us want to have come from the AEU actually can. One half-time person is not going to do it. My comment was 1.5 people.
Thank you, Jackie. I want to just reflect on a couple of things that I heard and then invite you to do the same as we close out this session. I'm going to paraphrase and quote, from the Hebrew Scriptures, where there is no vision, the people perish. That's something in my own early experiences that I learned. And that keeps coming up over and over for me as I continue my work with the American Ethical Union. And I hear it named here today in its own way. I've heard things around participation, our own participation, representative participation, both within our communities, our societies, and then also in the union. I hear stories of fatigue and burnout, and just kind of asterisking that to say that burnout's really a systemic issue. It's not an individual issue. So I want to remind folks about that. I hear regionality and lateral support, what it means to connect between societies, people between societies. I hear program support, especially around the leadership initiative, and I've heard that a lot actually in my one-on-one conversations. I've heard people talk about working with change, personally and collectively, what it means to retain flexibility. Neuroplasticity is a little bit of the way that I think about that. I've heard member recruitment, especially at the beginning of our conversation. What does it mean to invite folks into our space, newer folks? And behind that, what are our relationships with our communities, especially the ones that our societies are embedded within? And the last thing that I'll just name is trust. I feel like we're edging around that a little bit, but I feel like it's also the framing and foundation for where we may need to go in the next year. And I hear that in the conversations that are being had here today with each other, and just reminding us that this is the beginning of the conversation. I hope that these conversations will continue not only this weekend, but again, beyond this weekend, and shape our work going forward. And so to close that out, Jay, are you still in the room? Yes, there you are. Okay. Jay, if you could come up and help me out for a moment. Thank you. So this is a little bit of the reason about emergence. So I've named a couple of things that I've heard here. And what I would like to know is, given what you've heard from each other, what do you notice emerging? What are some of the themes that you're hearing? You can repeat something that I said or something that somebody else said. But what are some feelings, too, that you're noticing? It's always helpful to name feelings, because feelings often shape the way that we show up in our spaces and our work together. Maybe you want to name an aspiration, an action, or a direction that might inform our journey in the coming year, personally and together. So as you name those, Jay is going to put them on the paper here, and that'll be a starting place, a list. And maybe we can bring that back every now and then as we continue these conversations. So Trang, if you're willing once again to be our mic person, if you just raise your hand, very briefly, a phrase, a word, or a sentence, if you want to share some of the themes that you're hearing emerge from our conversation today. And I see Richard and then Ken in the back, and then we'll go to Zoom.
Okay, the I and the us are together on this one in terms of making a difference. I want to make a difference. I want the AEU to make a difference. I would like us to coalesce in what we're trying to make a difference. So that's it.
Thank you, Richard.
Deep cohort conversations.
Thanks, Ken. Jackie, did you also have?
Vision comes to my mind, and the opportunity for representatives of each society to participate in some visioning work if we have the same board, same number of people on the board.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going Charles behind you. Yeah.
I'd just like to say youth, because youth is the lifeblood of any organization.
Thank you. Are folks stacking on Zoom, Condra? Okay, thank you.
Imagination about what we can do together.
Thank you, Fred.
The need for deep and increased communication.
Imagination. So Fred talked about imagination. And can you remind, I know I've been in Zoom with you a number of times, but it's so different being in person. Can you remind me your name?
Sure, I'm Karen Elliott from Baltimore.
Thank you, Karen. And so Karen talked about deep communication. I'm liking that there are lots of hands coming up for this one.
I'm thinking about this concept of wholeness versus brokenness. How can we see and treasure each other when we're together in our wholeness? Also have room in our yearning for growth, have room for growth, but without a deficit feeling among ourselves. So that's the feeling that I'm having, is how can we experience wholeness, treasuring one another, even when we would welcome change, welcome others, yearn to perhaps grow, but not from a broken feeling.
Thank you, Audrey.
Audrey Kindred, NISAC.
Okay, so why don't we switch to Kimberly, and then we'll come back to being in the room. Sorry to cut you off there, Stan.
Sorry, the construction crew decided to tear down and shred a giant tree in the alley back there, and Mom was driving me nuts. I'm thinking, look, from where I'm at, we're pretty close to two other societies, Philadelphia and Washington. Perhaps we could have a sort of regional ambassadorship, and maybe every other month or quarterly, they could send an ambassador to attend each other's meetings, working out transport, hopefully without driving our treasurers crazy and or tech people crazy. But, we could have each other as speakers, different ones, ambassador for a day. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. I appreciate the theme there you're pulling out.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stan from Philadelphia, and I really like that idea, but what I was going to say is I'm feeling a sense of moving from separation to unity.
Thanks, Stan.
Thanks. Tom Castelnuovo from Brooklyn. The importance of specific projects with specific results.
Thank you, Tom.
Say that again. Specific projects with specific results. Thank you.
Rich Wash from Asheville. I'd love to have more ethics programs led by the AEU, participating with participation from multiple societies. We have the opportunity to leverage who we are and what we are.
And Condor in the back, and then we'll come back, and I see, or go to Emily, and then I think Michaelina is stacked, and then Condra.
Emily, Brooklyn, and DC. I would love to see some
trust building and confidence.
Thank you, Emily.
Greg, can I just ask Jay to add making a difference? That was my first comment. It's got the IO. Thank you, Jay.
Gotcha.
Hold on, where we at? Oh. Okay. Look at that right.
So I think we have Michaelina and Condra.
Hello, everyone. This is Michaeline. My last name is Karnasevitz. I would never torture anyone like that. But I wanted to acknowledge the intellectual and emotional maturity in this room. I'm a new member, and it is just reinforcing my desire to make this a lifelong commitment and to be an even more involved member.
Thank you, Michaeline, and I apologize for misnaming you. Mike. And then Condra? Oh, I see.
So Laura Steele from West says shared vision and strategy to get there.
Joe over here.
I think cultivating the courage to lead.
Thank you, Joe. Audrey?
Knowing that the planet needs us. Knowing that we're needed.
Thank you, Audrey.
I wanted to put out there heartbreak and joy are a couple words I heard today, and then also growth and publicity.
What was that last part? Growth and publicity. Is that right? Are there any last themes that we want to add to our board here? Well, if it's helpful for you, just take a deep breath. A lot of things have been named here. It's a big list. And I want to thank you for showing up here today, tonight. Thank you for your willingness to experiment, to talk with one another. I know we named some of these pieces, but this is part of what trust building looks like. It's starting to trust one another, to talk, to speak our hopes out loud, to be in a room together, to share some space together. Name also what Julia had just named, that there's grief, but there's also stuff here that's generative. There's also joy. And both are important. That's part of how we grow. It's part of how we heal, if that's what needs to happen. It's part of how we build trust, build some confidence. And just to reiterate that this is just the start, right? Invite you to consider where are you in this list? Setting aside the work of it for a moment, as Solomon mentioned, what is passion here for you? What connects you to your society and to the union and the movement? And as we come through the weekend, carry something with you. Take one or two words, one or two pieces. Remember the people you talked with. Remember the stories you heard. Because these are the folks that are here now. And these are the folks that are here with you. Doing the traditional look to your left, look to your right. These are the folks who are here. That will close our Emergent Conversations. So again, thank you. I really am looking forward to a weekend of exploring together. We've got some conversations, we've got some panelists. If there's anything on this list that we want to continue the conversation about, I'm hoping to host virtually some additional conversations like this, maybe turn it into, as Tom likes to remind us, some operational plans for specific outcomes with specific projects. That's very important. Moving things forward, not only identifying, describing a vision, but also figuring out how do we make that happen? How do we make it happen with the people in the room? Because those are the ones that are here right now. And moving toward inviting other folks into the room. But right now, that's who's here. So thank you.